Can you say wage price spiral? That's hard for me to say for some reason. I have a hard time with it. And I think it got just a little bit harder. According to the New York Fed, the lowest wage Americans are willing to take in order to accept a new job hit a record high this year. The average reservation wage, or the minimum acceptable salary offer required for workers to switch jobs, hit a high of $78,645. That's almost 80 grand a year, and it's up 8% from a year ago. Now, let's go over a few groups that have been demanding higher wages. Let's start with UPS and UAW and American Airlines. I mean, they've either negotiated and or signed new deals that dramatically raise wages. American Airlines announced just this morning its deal has a 21% pay increase right up front. No wonder the National Federation of Independent Businesses say that nearly half of small businesses believe that we're already in a recession. This is not going to end well, folks. My next guest says he thinks we're living through a structural change right now. Please welcome into the show Keith Fitz-Gerald. Keith, I read your notes. They're always really good. Why don't you explain to the viewers what you wrote to us about earlier today?
Sure. Well, let's start with the idea of wage pressure, right? First, it's clearly an inflationary input. But here's the thing. The headline number sounds big and it sounds egregious, but people can ask for whatever salary they want. I think the bigger issue is that it points out that higher talented workers are able to demand and get more money, but the rest of them are simply delusional. So there's a split in the labor pool. The other thing to think about is that every at-will employee that jumps ship is truly an at-will employee. Wait until the employers decide that they're no longer necessary. That's the real risk here, Scott. And
there's two things you just brought up there that maybe were just thinly veiled, but you're right. At some point in time, we're going to see a downturn or a cooling in the economy and or jobs, or obviously one leads to the other. Then suddenly all these folks that have thought that they've had the catbird seat in hand are not going to be that, right? And that's when I, by the way, think that you'll start to see a lot of people come back to the office, right? Because I don't want to give, it's going to be easy to fire Keith if you never see him. But if Keith's in before I am every single day, boy, it's going to be tough to fire that guy, right? I think that's one of them. And then the other thing, real quick, before you give it back to you, is artificial intelligence is slowly but surely going to start to make a dent in their plans too.
Well, it is, right? And again, you know, this idea that suddenly woe is us, I think, and I submit, we're living through a structural change, Scott. That's why people can't come to terms with it. I believe we entered a recession January of last year. We've now come out of that, and the world, in fact, is shifting. The fact that economists can't agree on what to call this thing means the models are broken. So we're shifting to AI. We're shifting to digital currency. We're shifting to high-value digital inputs, which means all of the metrics designed to measure an economy of 120 years ago when we were primarily agrarian don't apply in today's world. So the Fed, rather than saying, hey, what's wrong, getting new counsel, seeking new direction, is simply trying to bring a squirt gun to a different kind of a fight.
Yeah, so are you feeling what I'm feeling a little bit about? Maybe there's something at play here as far as, say, a global slowdown goes. I mean, these GDPs keep getting ratcheted lower, except for ours at 5.8%. I have no idea what the Atlanta Fed is smoking with that 5.8% GDP. But it seems to me that Western countries that fought COVID the same way by just sending everybody home and pouring a ton of money into their economies are all fighting the same thing, out of control inflation and bankrupted balance sheets.
Well, you would think we'd learn, right? But this reminds me very specifically of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. Panem et circenses, bread and circuses. So what they're doing is they're engaging in a huge systematic slew of programs to hand things out and distract people from the real issues, which are a change of control, increasing discontent, and the fact the economy is moving on and people have decided that many of the traditional government structures we thought we needed before COVID are in fact irrelevant and a bad bargain. I don't mind paying taxes because it means I've had a good year, but I mind paying taxes to a government I don't trust and I don't think is using the money properly. That's what's going on globally.
All right, so I'll go back to your Latin, the bread and circus thing. Do you think that there's a lot of that bread and circus going around now so that we don't realize that they're going to sneak in these central bank digital currencies as a way of control? They might come back for some sort of lockdown, which could be not from maybe climate, but not from COVID, but maybe from climate or something like that. Is that maybe taking place here a little bit as well?
Well, you know, normally I'm not a card-carrying member of the Tinfoil Hat Club, but In this instance, I do think it is very, very deliberate, but it's not about freedom of currency and freedom of digital exchange like they're talking about. This is really all about currency control. That's the big fear for central bankers because they're trying to remain relevant when increasing swaths of the world have decided they already aren't. So if you look at, I spoke in Las Vegas recently at a big convention, investors, and I asked the question, who's going to be elected in the fall? Is it going to be Biden? Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be somebody new? Overwhelmingly, 85% of the hands that went up were in the something new, somebody new category. And that spoke to every department. Cross-party lines didn't matter. That's where the world is and why I think we are truly very, very, very precipitously approaching the edge of what was the Western Roman Empire.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll wait and see. I do feel that you're onto something there because there is a global slowdown happening. I mean, it's not just us. I mean, look at what's happening in Japan and the UK and the Eurozone. There are issues there. There are very structural issues that are telling me that, buyer beware. I think that that's something that you brought to the forefront here. And I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, we are on the precipice of something. I hate saying it like that because it's so nebulous, but that's how it feels. Real quick, go ahead.
But one thing that's really interesting and really cool about history is that we know every time we've gone to the edge on something like this, we see this tremendous resurgence and a blossoming of new thought. We saw the French Renaissance. We saw the change over to the Germanic empires. We saw a blossoming of medical knowledge, of literacy, of all sorts of other things. So I submit if we have companies like Apple and Microsoft and Google that are continuing to move forward, they are the new wave. So if we can harness AI, we can do things right, then all the small businesses that are struggling right now, in fact, might come to the forefront. There's a tremendous opportunity here, Scott. That's the part that I think is getting blown.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. All right. That's a great one to leave it on. Really appreciate you coming on. Keith Fitz-Gerald, a big fan of the show. Thank you very much, Keith. You're definitely coming back.
Hi, it's Keith here. Thanks for checking out today's highlight clip. What'd you think? Did I make sense? Is there something you'd like to add? Make sure you leave a comment down below. And of course, click subscribe to keep up right here on YouTube or sign up for the email newsletter at the link below. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram for my real-time thoughts on markets, analysis, and a whole lot more.